Hi guys, this is Miss Emily at Upstage Dance Center, and we are here with Trinity today to do makeup for recreational dancers. So we are starting out with Trinity a clean face. So her face has been washed, it's nice and free from any dirt or debris from the day before. She doesn't have any makeup on, and she's got moisturizer on just to make sure that her skin is really prepped and ready to go. Normally we would also want to make sure that she has on a button-up shirt. If you have the makeup kit paper, we have extra copies of this out in the front lobby underneath the TV and the file holders. And then you also should have received a copy of this at Parents Week, and there's an extra copy that was emailed to you as well. So we are going to use this several times throughout, and I'll just point out the different items that we're using as we're going through. So we're starting out with some powder on her face, and you can use whatever type of powder that you want. Just get something that is either translucent or is going to match your child's skin tone. So we're going to just kind of lightly press this powder on, and we want to make sure that we're covering her face. So the powder is going to provide a nice even skin tone, and it's going to give us a nice surface that we can then blend the blush with, and we can just really have a nice clean slate for everything else that we're doing. So making sure that I'm putting this all over her face, and I am using a brush, but you can use a little powder puff that comes with the powder that you buy. The one that we have didn't come with a powder puff, so I'm just using a brush to apply it. But we're putting this all over, and I'm even going to put a little bit on her lips just so that they're the same as everything else on her face. And then once you've got that done, we are going to use the Wet n Wild Color Icon Blush. So I'm using a separate blush brush because the brush that comes with this is not very good at dispersing the color. It's not a good shape for your cheek. Think about the shape of the brush. So the shape of the brush on your cheek would create kind of just like a stripe, and we want something that's a little bit fluffier, a little bit rounder, because that's the shape of a cheek. So we're just gonna kind of put that to the side, and you can throw it away if you want to, but just get yourself a nice brush. So we're gonna just put this on her cheeks, and we're just kind of lightly fluffing this on, and we're not gonna do anything too heavy. We don't want her to look like a clown, and we're not also gonna do anything that goes too high up her cheek. So we really wanna keep it kind of focused on the part of her cheek that would naturally be rosy. So we're just kind of lightly putting that on, and then we're gonna move to the other side, and same thing again. And I'm just gonna come around to the front to check to see that she's got the blush looking good. So again, we don't want it to be very heavy, but we should be able to see it on her cheeks. So if we're putting it on and it's kind of blending out and not really showing up whenever we're done, we want to go back in and make sure that it's still visible. We don't want it to all be pointless. Okay, so that is good. And after we're done with the blush, we are going to move on to the eyeshadow. And I'm using the CoverGirl Quad. This is the golden palette. So I am using the sponge tip applicator that comes with this. There are two sides of this. So there's a thicker side and then there's a skinnier side. So we are gonna actually use the thicker side for applying a lot of color. So anything that's gonna go all over her lid, anything that is just gonna go in a more concentrated area, we're gonna use the skinnier side. So I'm gonna go into that first color, the lightest color here, and we are going to just get that on our sponge tip applicator, and then close your eyes for me. We're just gonna brush this all over. And when you use an eyeshadow like this, you really kind of wanna use like a patting motion. So if we just kind of swipe it on, it's gonna make the product kind of fall out and a little too powdery. So I'm not really just swiping it on, I'm kind of just dabbing it. And as I'm doing that, it's transferring the color to her eyelid. And then I'm just gonna go back in one more time to make sure that we have a nice full coverage. And then I'm gonna do the other side. And anything extra, we're gonna kind of just blend away here in a minute. So if you think that it looks a little too heavy or too separated right now, we're just gonna go back in just a second and fix that up. So again, just going in, patting it on. And I'm going pretty much all over her entire eyelid. So I'm going from the inner corner up to about where her brow bone is. I'm not going quite up all the way to her eyebrows. And then I'm going down, out, and around her eye socket. And then I'm going all the way down to the lash line. So once we've got that first color on, we are going to go back in with the second color. So the second color is this kind of more of a coppery tone. And we're gonna use the thick side of that again. I'm just flipping it over to the other side. So I'm not mixing those two colors together. And then once we get this, I'm putting this just on the lower half. So where her actual eyeball is. So it's more of a kind of a half sun shape. And you can see, hopefully, the difference in those two colors. So we've got the lighter color up at the top, and then we've got this darker color down underneath. And like I said, anything that's falling out, we'll just brush that away at the end with a nice powder brush. And I'm trying not to touch her face a lot right now because I don't want my hand to mess up the makeup that's already on. So I'm just kind of lightly doing this. If you need to use your hand as kind of a brace, then it's a good idea to get like a powder puff or something like that and just slide it onto your pinky so that when you put your hand up against their face, it's not going to disrupt anything. So I'm not doing that, but if you need that stability, then just get you a nice little powder puff and use that as kind of like a balancing point. All right, so we're done with those first two, and now we're going to go back in with the darkest shade. So the darkest shade I'm actually going to use the skinny end for, and I'm skipping that third one. So this third one we're not really going to use. We're going to go to that darkest one, and we're actually going to use this as a crease color and as a eyeliner almost. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go into her crease here and really define that out. And then I'm going to pull it across and in just a little bit. So I'm going about 3/4 to 2/3 of the way in her eye with that crease color. I'm not going all the way to the inner corner. And then I'm also going to go along her lash line. So this is going to be like an eyeliner. Unless you have a child who is very, very calm and very still, you're probably not going to be able to put an eyeliner on a child. So this is the next best thing. So we're putting that up next to her lashes just to kind of define them, to give them a little bit more darkness and thickness. So the point of eyeliner is to make the eyelashes look thicker. So since we don't have that, we're just doing that same thing here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So going into that crease. And then down on the lash line. All right, and then once we've got all of those colors placed, we're just gonna go back in with our powder brush or with a eyelash or an eyeshadow brush and just kind of brush away any of that excess powder. So you don't really wanna use your hand for this because if you use your hand, it's gonna end up pushing that pigment into the skin, which is then gonna cause you to have color underneath your eyes. So we don't want that. So we have to use something fluffy to just brush that away. So this isn't putting any pressure on her skin, and it's not gonna let that color blend into the rest of her face. So any of that fallout, we're just brushing it away really lightly. And then I'm gonna use an eyeshadow brush to kind of blend out the edges here too. So we're just blending this out, and I'm just taking this brush and kind of making sure that the edges are nice and blended. So we don't see any harsh lines. We don't see anything where makeup is just starting and stopping. It's all kind of blending together, so you can't really tell where that's happening. And this is just a dry makeup brush. This doesn't have anything on it. It's completely clean so that we've got we're not worrying about transferring any color or smearing anything around. All right, and after we are done with the eyeshadow, we're going back to this palette. We are gonna do mascara on Trinity. So if you have a child who is a little bit younger and can't sit still, or they're a little bit flinchy whenever you put something near their eye, you might wanna skip the mascara step, but Trinity's gonna be able to handle it. So we're just gonna put that on for her. And I'm actually gonna come from behind her. So if I sit in front of her, what's gonna happen is as I move, and I'm just keeping this in the tube. So as I move up, this would hit her eye, and it's gonna be a little more likely that I would transfer some of the mascara onto her nice eyelids that we just did. So we don't want that to happen. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna come behind her, and I'm gonna make sure that whenever I'm putting this on, I'm pulling it up and away from her face, okay? So from behind her, I'm just steadying her head with my hand, and then I'm just wiggling this in and pulling it up through the tips of her lashes. So I'm not worrying about getting all the way at the base of her lashes. I'm just worrying about getting it on the ends and coating them so that we see the darkness of her lashes. It's gonna create a nice contrast for her eyes, and we wanna make sure that you get as much as possible. And I'm not gonna even worry about doing the lower lashes, just because again, that can be a little tricky with small children. So we're skipping that step and just doing the tops. So again, I'm just gonna come over, I'm gonna steady her with my hand a little bit. I'm just wiggling this into the tips of her lashes. And I'm making sure that when I pull it up, I'm not pushing it in toward her face. So I'm pulling it up, but I'm pulling it out away from her face as I do that. So this is just giving her eyelashes a little bit more definition so that when we see her on stage, we'll be able to tell those are her eyes. All right, and so once we've got all of that done, if you do have a child who's got thin eyebrows or who might be a little bit less full, you can use a brow product to fill those in a little bit. Again, it's just gonna kind of help shape the eyes. It's gonna help kind of provide a frame for the rest of the face. So you can use either a pencil, this is a pencil, or you can use a product like this that actually has, this has a pencil at one end and it's a little bit thicker. So this is a thin pencil, this is a little bit thicker. You can use a powder product. There are pomade products. For a young child, I would suggest using something a little bit on the powderier side. I wouldn't ever use a pomade just because it's too easy to get out of the lines and then you've got pomade all over their face. So the powder is a little bit more user-friendly. I am gonna use a pencil today because that's what we have. And we are just gonna kind of go in and fill in her brows a little bit. So we're not doing anything crazy here. We're just making sure that they are a little bit more full and that she has some definition there. Let me use the thin one. And when you fill in your child's eyebrows, you don't have to fill them in exactly where the hairs are growing. So with Trinity, she's a younger child, so she doesn't have her eyebrows done. So I'm not gonna fill in all of those extra spaces where she's got small hairs down here. I'm not gonna fill any of that in. I'm just gonna kind of create the illusion that she has a shaped brow with the product that I'm putting in. So I'm just kind of going in, and again, if you had a powder, most of those come with an angle brush. So you would just take that angled brush, dip it in the powder, and then you would just brush it on the exact same way that I'm doing here. So I'm just filling it in to make sure that we have a nice frame on her face. And then in the other side. And again, I'm trying not to touch her face. It's a little bit difficult to do without touching, just because you need kind of a point to steady yourself with. But if you can, try not to mess anything up that you've already spent time working on. And again, if you have that problem where you need to put your hand on something, just get a powder puff or something like that so that you're not rubbing their makeup away. And this is an optional step. You don't have to do this. This is just completely up to you and what you're comfortable with. If you have a child who, again, is okay with sitting through that, then you're more than welcome to do that, but it's not necessary. It's not mandatory. her lips. And I am not using a lip liner or anything like that with her. So her lips are already clean from earlier. I put a little bit of that powder on, but she doesn't have anything else on them. She doesn't have a chapstick or a balm or anything like that on her lips right now. She is completely fresh. So this is a nice product because it actually stays in place really well. So I know a lot of time with younger kids, it's easy for them to accidentally wipe their lips, or if they have chapped lips, they want to touch them, or they want to pick at their lips, or they want to bite. So with this, it's a little nicer. It dries down matte and it stays in place pretty well. So you're not going to have the issue with it getting smudged all over their face. So we're going to just start, and I'm going to come down here in front. We're going to start on her lower lip, and she's just kind of sitting relaxed right now. And I'm pushing that in. And she's not pulling her lips tight or anything like that. They're just kind of relaxed right now. So later on, I'm going to have her actually make some faces. That'll be fun. But for right now, we're just filling that center part in. So I'm not worried about the line of her lips right now and defining that. I'm just filling in the inner parts. And then later, I'll have her, like I said, make some faces. And we'll get those outer edges done. Okay, go ahead and go like this for me. Okay, so she's just making her lips a little tighter so that we can get on there and her lips aren't going to bounce around as I'm putting this on. We're going to start on the top. And then as you do this, anytime they need to sneeze or move, or if something itches, you really want to ask them to let you know so that you're not in the middle of doing something and then they decide, oh, I need to stop and do something, and then makeup goes all over their face. So if anything happens, just let me know. Okay, do the same thing again, so tighten your lips. Thank you. Okay, and then over here. And I'm really focusing on making sure that the color I'm putting on the inside of her lips. So as I pull it through, I'm not going this way, because if she flinches, it's gonna end up going all over her cheek. Again, we don't want that to happen because we just spent all that time making sure that her makeup looks great. So as I'm pulling it toward the center of her mouth. That way if she does flinch, it's gonna go into her mouth and it's not gonna color anything or leave any extra pigment. So now we're just doing the bottom part. She's straightening or stretching her lips out again for me. And I'm just going in. And then doing the other side. All right. And once we've got that done, kind of let it dry for a little bit. Try not to let them purse their lips together and do this until it dries. So as it's still wet, it will still move around. So we really want to make sure that that dries down before they start to lick their lips or do anything like that, or else the color is going to smudge away and go in places that we don't want it to go in. All right, and the last thing that we're going to do is the setting spray. And this is the e.l.f. setting spray. Again, it's on that same sheet. It's the very last thing. And this is just designed to make sure that her makeup stays in place. If you have a child who's in more than one dance, they might get hot or sweaty at some point, and we don't want all of that makeup to then just run all over their face. So this is a good product. It's designed to just make sure that that makeup stays where it's supposed to. And then she's gonna close her eyes for me. Close your mouth. So your lips should be good by now. And then we're just gonna kind of lightly spray this in an X shape across her face. So I'm gonna start up here and I'm gonna come down. And as I come down, it's just gonna lay on her face. I'm doing the same thing again. And I'm not spraying it like at the top or at the bottom. I'm trying to spray it right when I hit the middle so that it disperses and it goes all over. And then I'm also gonna do a T shape. So I'm gonna go down and then I'm gonna go from side to side. Okay, once that's on, it is gonna be a little bit wet. Okay, so we're gonna need to let her face dry a little bit. And while that's happening, we don't want to touch anything or else that is gonna smudge. So we're just gonna kind of take a fan or something and just lightly fan her. And And that's gonna let that setting spray dry, and then she's good to go. All right. And I have some eye makeup remover on hand at all times, just because if I am doing makeup and something happens and I did get mascara on the upper eyelid, or if the lipstick came out of her lip line, I would just take a little bit of this on a Q-tip and wipe that away. So you don't have to completely remove the entire face just to fix one little spot. So it's a nice thing to have a liquid makeup remover like this on hand. That way you can fix little mistakes like that. And then the last thing I would say, at the end of the day, after they're done dancing, just take a makeup remover wipe, make sure that you are removing all of that. So we don't want her to sleep in it, we don't want it to stay in her pores or anything like that. And she is younger, we don't have to worry about breakouts or anything like that, but it's just nice to have a fresh face. So anything that you guys have questions about or comments, just leave down below in the comment box and we will try to respond back to you. And other than that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye.